I'm gonna let Jason introduce Brett. We're super fortunate to have him here. I'm gonna say a few words about Jason. I'll make it quick. This event wouldn't have happened without Jason and SaaStr. It was him saying, "Hey, I'm gonna be in LA. We should do something," and me saying, "Yeah, cool, let's do that." You know, I think that with his sort of straight shooting, expert, tactical guidance, if you sort of added up the number of people that he has, the number of SaaS founders that he has helped times the amount by which he has helped them, it's probably more aggregate help to SaaS founders than anyone else in the world. And so we're really fortunate that, that we've all gained from that benefit. So I'm going to hand this over to you guys. Jason, you can introduce.
Well, good. Again, thanks everyone for coming out. This is pretty awesome. We have a treat here with Brett Queener. Brett is now President and CEO of Smart Recruiters. We're going to talk a lot about scaling a SaaS company that's just raised $30 million in fresh capital. This particular stage, we're going to talk a lot about that. But we have a special treat because I got to know Brett at least a tiny bit when he was EVP, SVP, all the things you put in front of a VP at Salesforce. Yes. And why that's interesting is all the folks I ever met at Salesforce, Brett was different. He would take an opinion, he would make an opinion, and he always had a holistic view, thinking out of what would happen at the most successful SaaS company on the planet by a large margin, but also one that was somewhat monolithic. So it was always interesting to hear different shades of opinions. And so I want to talk about a lot of things today, but one of the things we'll touch on is...
Can we talk about that meeting for a second?
Sure, which meeting? Yes.
So at some point, Mark Benioff decided we should get into electronic signature. And I said, well, we don't even have a quote in Salesforce. It's a little bit of a stretch. And I remember that EchoSign had come in, and I had been warned, this CEO is, you're not going to let the CEO, he's wacky, he's crazy, etc. And we went in to meet, and I walked out of the meeting, and I was like, that guy's crazy, but crazy in an awesome way, right? And I was like, if we're going to do a deal in this space, it's that guy I want to bet on. So it's hard. We'll talk about founders because I've worked for 3 now. 2 were Jewish billionaires that used to work for Larry Ellison. So that's my historical comparable. And there's a sort of magic and a soul and sort of a zany, often non-rational but emotional truth that you get out of a founder. And in just an hour meeting, I figured that was something where we haven't spent a lot of time since there, but it was a meaningful meeting for me.
It's a good, be the good kind of crazy.
I made you blush a little.
Yeah. Well, good. Let's. I want to talk about that second. And I didn't plan on talking about money a lot, but Adam's talk about the struggle to raise money I thought was fascinating. That was a great discussion. So, just to help folks here, especially in LA, so you just raised $30 million.
Yes.
Announced a couple weeks ago, so probably happened 2 years ago. Now, what's the gap from close to announcement these days?
We don't do that. We do it like the next day.
The next day?
Wow, we got some cash.
All right.
So no, it's the next day.
So a couple things to, because I mean, Cornerstone, what did we just learn? Adam raised $20 million before he IPO'd, and you've raised your first 30 of the 300 before your IPO, whatever the number is. But it is different. It's a great case study of what Adam said.
Yes.
So what's the environment like today? How hard was it to raise $30 million post-February? What does it take? What were the investors looking for? What did they care about? What did they not care about to write a check of that size?
Yeah, Smart Recruiters was an interesting, non-traditional route to raising money. Most people, if they go into an enterprise category, they'll start with sort of one area, one widget, monetize it, sell it some more, and raise. Jerome, who's my partner and founder, had taken his first 2 rounds and said, I'm not monetizing, and we're going to build out this platform. And when it's ready, we're going to go sell this to enterprise companies. So, audacious. And so, to raise capital, what was interesting was we had tried to raise capital about 18 months ago. And since we'd raised it at A and a B, the reality is, I don't care if people, when you meet a VC and they say, hey, we're flexible, et cetera. It's a very simple model. If you raise them to A and a B, they want to see 10 million recurring revenue. Basically what they're going to say is, I don't invest in business model risk. I only want to invest in execution risk. So ironically was we had kind of given up on fundraising for a while, and we got a lot of sort of inbound demand. And it's sort of a weird game, right? If you go out to raise money, it's not as crazy as Silicon Valley and show Silicon Valley, but if you go out to raise money, it seems harder than if people actually come to you. So we had actually cultivated a relationship over a year with a number of traditional seed investors.
Yeah.
So in my mind, we had heard at the end of last year, we had the dip in the NASDAQ, the BDP went down, but for those that have been in tech for 20 to 25 years, these things come and go. And in my mind, if you have, I think there are 4 things that investors are looking at. Now this is a C. I think when you're raising money, I think it's also important to think about what is a C investor, what's an A investor, what's a B investor, and not think about what you want, but I think you need to understand and put yourself in the mind of the investor and the return that they need, and for the fund they're in, what their investors are and what their return is. So if you're going to raise a C, a traditional C, not the silly C of the last 2 or 3 years where there's a lot of silly growth money, these are investors that are looking for more moderate returns. And so I think if you've got a large market opportunity, our market in whole is a $400 billion market. There's $400 billion we're spending recruiting. We are first focused on the enterprise replacement market for recruiting software, which is a $5 billion replacement market. Second, are you differentiated? You mentioned we're in a competitive space. You know, when I was at Siebel, there was 50 SFA systems. At Salesforce, they'd all failed. You gotta remember, in 2003, when I joined Salesforce, it was on demand, and I would walk into deals, and CFOs would say, I'm not gonna buy you because you're more expensive, because I gotta pay for you every year, right?
They figured that out even back then, that SaaS was more expensive, right?
Yeah, well, it wasn't then, but now they figure out that it is. You have to buy 11 solutions on top of Salesforce. That's another story for another day. So if you have, and you have traction. And so for us, they want to basically see traction. And we had closed, we launched our product at the beginning of 15. We closed 800 clients. And we'd gotten to sort of a magical revenue run rate. And management. Have you sort of figured out some level, have you been able to recruit some level of management that has some level of experience? So at a C, I think if you've got those items, and I think if you're rational around what your valuation expectations are, there's a deal to be done. We were surprised. We had 5 term sheets. We didn't take the highest. We took the one that we thought had the most experience and insight in working with similar size companies at our stage.
Yeah, now be objective. And let's transition to the next question I have. How helpful was it having you as president and CEO of the company to fundraise? You're a well-known entity, right?
Well, I mean, you know, it depends, right? You know, one of the reasons I went to go to a startup was, you know, 6 years at Salesforce, at Siebel, and 11 at Salesforce. You ask yourself, as an executive who did this, can you hire a big company guy? You ask yourself, like, are you really that good? Are you just amazing at feeling upwards as an executive? You picked well from a company perspective. So I don't think it hurt, right? I mean, I think if you think about the fundraising proposition is we have a founder who knows the space, is passionate about the space, and we have somebody who's scaled companies that can recruit and who knows SaaS and has seen this movie before. So I don't think it hurt. Yeah. But I would say that I had Jerome play a more active role in the fundraising because to some extent he's a founder. And there's something special about a founder. You want to make sure this is a founder. If you're a traditional investor, is this somebody you can count on for the long term?
So let's go back. When you joined Smart Recruiters, how many employees? How big was the company? Employees is always a good number.
We had 50 employees.
50.
44 were developers. Our development team is in Poland.
44 developers.
Yeah, go Krakow. You can hire.
And they're full-time employees.
Full-time employees like the Google at Krakow. You go there, it's amazing. You can get a senior you can get an SMTS for $40,000 and they stay. Amazing. A little story about the difference in Poland versus here is that in the U.S. when you have like a beer bash, etc., you know, people walk around with their glass, maybe their name on it. In Poland, they walk around with like a fifth of alcohol with their name on it. So it's a little different. You know, it was in the office.
Does that make the coding better after?
I don't know. I tell you, they're very literal. I was walking around the office the other day, and I was going into our fridge, in our fridge here, we've got coconut water and all the things that San Francisco people want. We even have a keg of kombucha, but God forbid, I don't really know, Snackapalooza. And the fridge there is giant bottles of non-alcoholic beer. And I walk up and I said, well, why is this all non-alcoholic beer? He said, well, Brett, you realize that Poland is very strict drunk driving laws. And so I think about it, I think it's very rational. I said, okay. But then I said, well, wait a second. There's like juice and soda and water, but they didn't really compute. They like the taste of beer. So.
All right, so 45 engineers, that's a lot, and 5 folks keeping the lights on and no one in sales? It was Smart Recruiters enterprise focused at that
point? Revenue. No revenue. Zero revenue. So,
zero revenue.
So it's very interesting.
How the heck does a Salesforce executive with a corner office and like, how many people reported to you at the peak? How many people reported to you? Hundreds and hundreds of people.
Yeah, north of 500.
How could you go from 500 people to 0 in revenue? What were you thinking? Like, what was the thought process?
It all makes sense now.
You get to manage people like me.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there must have been, I can guarantee you there were a dozen VCs that wanted to bring you into their company, right?
Look, I think my viewpoint at the time was that if I was going to leave Salesforce, which is a tough, both financially and emotionally, it's a family, employee 100 there, then I always had, you know, it's what generally happens with people that decide at some point to do a startup. It's sort of like a midlife crisis. I've been caring for my ill father, and I sort of, don't ever do this. Don't ever go like on safari to Africa and look out on the plains and look at the smallness of man and figure out like, can I do this? The last couple of years, as you know, I've done a lot of the M&A, and I had the interesting job at Salesforce where we bought acquisitions, where you cashed out the founder, and my job was to assimilate them into the board, but keep their founder childish joy, which wasn't easy.
Hard.
And I just found it a lot more fun and interesting trying to work with founders in the earlier stage. And so I decided that I didn't want to, when I was done, because it wasn't about the money, to not have tried it.
Yep.
And in theory, when I got out of Harvard Business School in 1997, I was going to go be an entrepreneur. The challenge at the time in 1997 was all eyeballs. So I had friends that did Pets.com, Socks.com, All Advantage, and I looked at those business models and I was like, I don't really understand. Maybe I don't know anything I learned at business school, but like there's no, you're paying, your cost of acquisition is like $2 for every dollar revenue. There's no long-term differentiation. So, you know, I lucked into enterprise software, and I had just gotten fortunate with Siebel and Salesforce. So for me, it was about going to a startup. And then at that stage was, I wanted to go early, and the biggest thing for me was, I'd always thought that the teams that I had at Salesforce and Siebel had the best kick-ass culture. You know, there are corporate cultures. If anybody knows Siebel, there's a culture that it's brilliant. It's a little mind-numbing. And then Salesforce has a culture. And I'd always tried to create a team of just sort of kick-ass, work hard, play hard, but also realize that we're not curing cancer and not take ourselves so seriously. So I wanted the opportunity to go early enough where I could shape and create a culture.
So I get that.
Yeah.
So talk about, now a lot of folks in this room that are, I mean, you joined Smart Recruiters at 0 in revenue.
Yeah.
Folks here at $1 million in revenue, $2 million in revenue. They're doing great. They know nothing about, this is their first time they've done it. They love to recruit someone like you to come into their company. So how can you make this work? How can you take someone from, Salesforce was probably 3 or 4 billion in revenue when you left, right? Siebel was not. How do you make this work? What are the learnings, and what did you screw up that you do better the next time?
There's a lot there. So, look, I think if you're going to go try to think about hire a big company person, one, I generally advise people, I wouldn't do it until you kind of raise your B, because I don't think you know what you don't know at that point. Because I think if you're going to go hire somebody, and you're going to give them a significant stake in your company, and to some extent, they're going to be your partner, you're going to rely on them as your partner, you kind of need to understand, as a founder, what you know, what you don't know, and what you're really looking for someone to go do as well. I think the other thing is it really comes down to a personality thing to some extent. I think the biggest challenge is I was interviewing, now that we've raised the money, I get the opportunity to actually hire next level leadership. You know, you get to hire like the next level of leadership. You know, the biggest shock if you're a big company and you worked at a big company and you work at Salesforce or Siebel, you have unlimited money. You can hire the best of the best in any role at any price. You even get to meet people that are great and say, I don't know what the job is, I'm going to hire you. Nobody in the room, for the most part, gets to do that, right? And if you find 4 great people, you get to hire 1. And you sit there and you're like, I'm really sucking in this area. I need to hire somebody. This is the best I could get. I'm not real well known. In my view, it really comes down to personality fit and how ready they are. You know, I think if you go to a startup, what I learned, and I tell people who leave Salesforce or others, I'm going to a startup, I say 0 revenue, 10 million or 50, right?
Yep.
0, 10 or 50. And I said the big difference at 0 is you have no idea until you get there, until you're beat up 5 times a day, until you chart your course. And what I tell them immediately, no one told me until 9 months after I joined, go read the hard things about hard things. Right? Go read it out of the gate. And the second I read that, I was like, oh, okay, this is fine. I'll stop grinding my teeth. Which is you need somebody that's is okay with failure. Because if you're a C, an A, and a B, you basically have to know that 5 times a day you're going to get punched in the teeth. And you get 1 win at the end of the day, and you celebrate that win, and you forget the 5 failures. And I think that's the hardest thing to deal with hiring somebody from a big company that is tied to success. And then I think the other thing is how ready they are at a personal level. A startup is very personal. When you work in a large company, increasingly, the sleepless nights is always the man. Oh, the man in this meeting didn't allow me to do, or the man was rude. Well, if you're the CEO or you bought an apartment, you are the man or the woman. And all the failures are all your own. If your employees are struggling, it's your own struggles. And it's highly personal. So for me, I think that's the key thing to look for. You know? Now, people call me the original honey badger. Somehow I survived 11 years at Salesforce. Who knew? You know, I remember an early meeting with Bart when he invited me to an offsite and told me to pack light because he might send me home. You know, it's about readiness, and I think the other thing to look for when you're looking to bring people on is you will go to large company executives and you'll like their confidence. It's appealing. They seem to know what they're doing. But you need to make sure that they're a we person and they're not an I person. Because there's no I in a startup. You are going to win and fail together. And that's a hard thing to figure out. So that's, you know, I do advising to a lot of startups that want to bring people in, and they say, what about this person? I say, run as far away as you can. So anyway, that's sort of my advice. We figured it out along the way.
Yeah.
But it's as much an emotional journey as it is a rational journey.
Let me I want to move on to at least one other meaty topic, but let me boil it down to a number. What's your gut, based on Salesforce and Siebel, what % of director, VP level folks you've worked with could join something as early as Smart Recruiters and be successful? What %?
5%.
5%. Right. So if you don't do your homework and you're seduced by the big smile and the
selling.
selling.
Depends on the role. Like if I was hiring like somebody to do product, maybe okay. But
really VP product, like come in and own a bug-filled, feature gap-ridden company and go beat Smart Recruiters with Queener there? You think that? You think what? I think it's like 5%.
It depends at the level. I mean, I would say that. Look, I think.
But fair point. Product higher chance of success.
Maybe at a director level, good. Because look, if you think about Salesforce, what did we hire for? I think it's what Adam spoke to. You know, the grand irony. I remember getting out of college. And I wanted to get into tech. I had my first job, my last honest job. I ran a factory at a nuclear medical imaging company in lovely Milpitas, California. And I wanted to get into software, and they were like, well, you don't have any software experience. And the grand irony about software is it has nothing to do with experience. We don't produce physical product. It's all about intellect. What you hire for is IQ and EQ. And if somebody has 3 or 4 data points, are they flexible? And can they quickly come up with a framework to say, I think I'm going to go do this. And you look at it, and then they go do it. And if can they get data points to say, does it work? And then you do more of it. And if it didn't work, you go, oh, that sucked, and then don't do it again. That's Salesforce.com. That's what we hired for. So I think there are some levels of that. Yeah. But I think it's part of.
But these guys don't want a hire director. They want a VP to solve their problems. I want to solve my problems in sales, marketing, product, engineering.
Yeah.
And Salesforce is it's attractive. So is Cornerstone. We're not poaching from Cornerstone here. So
I would say the area where I think you could probably hire with a higher degree of success would be in sales.
Yeah.
I think on the inside sales team, the inside sales team and leadership at Salesforce is bar none.
But 5% is a good. I'm going to write this blog post out. 5% is the answer.
Mark's going to love that. Right.
No, it's just in general. What are your odds of an average big company exec making it at a very early stage startups? 5%. And if you don't do your homework, and if you don't get the odds up, you have a 95%.
Well,
if you do your work, the odds go up.
I think they could succeed, but I think after the first year, I think half of them say, "To hell with this."
That's true. They get boomerang.
This is
boomerang
hard.
too, right?
This is really hard.
Yeah.
This is soul-crushing work. You just got to persevere through it.
And then see how you're the most expensive person in my
Yeah,
company.
and then,
Like, I took such a pay cut to come to your crappy little company.
you convinced your spouse this was going to be a better thing. And,
Yeah.
And they're trying to put the family, the family's still living on a Salesforce budget.
Yeah,
and,
there's a lot. That makes it hard too.
And you're working twice as hard. Yeah. So.
All right, there's one big topic I want to make sure, if nothing else, we get into, which is market segmentation, going up market. And so let's step back. Smart recruiters. Average deal size is all in the six figures. Is that
So about 100,000.
100,000 average.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know you do more than ATS, but talk a little bit about the space and how it segments by like
Sure.
deal size
Sure.
and that, because I want to dig in on what the choices you made here.
Sure. So it's a really weird company in that I have got to go enterprise 5 years faster than I did at Salesforce.
Yeah.
So I got a call this morning, a 350,000 employee company, and I wanted to say to them, guys, we're not ready, but we really like you. I'm like, guys, I'm not ready. In our market, it's an interesting market. In recruiting, well, the interesting thing, look, why did I join the space? Quickly, in my mind, my entire career, my entire success was tied to who I hired. I think of the good years, it was who I hired. The bad years was like, oh, that was a bad hire.
Yeah.
And at the end, when I'm running a meeting and I'm looking at what's my pipeline, I can kind of get it out of Marketo, Eloqua, HubSpot, they all kind of meld together. I can kind of get my forecast out of Salesforce. I can kind of get retention. I didn't need Gainsight to figure it out. And then Oracle could kind of tell me, and then I go, how are we doing on recruiting? And like there was some spreadsheet that would pop up and no one knew anything and pointing fingers. My space, it's about a $5 billion market. In my market, there's a large existing install base of legacy software that was originally designed Metaphor 15 years ago. There's a company called Taleo. It was started with guys who sold the company to Bond, and their design principle was they'd sold a parts movement product across the factory floor. So the entire legacy recruiting software is if you can move a part through a factory floor, you can move a human through a hiring process. Turns out it's not that way. So when I looked at this market, and I'm not a genius, I would go out and talk to a bunch of clients. And I go to a small business client, there's 15 meetings, and they had $4,000, and there was 15 vendors. And I was talking to like the front desk lady. And I would go meet with large enterprise clients, and there was like 3 calls, and they were halfway through the demo, they had me stop, and they say, does this work? Because this works, I might want to do it. But this buyer's lost all hope because there's a second, third version of this software that's failed. So I'm not a genius. I looked at that and I said, okay, here's the opportunity. And in my market, I originally had thought, I'm going to do the Salesforce model. It's a Salesforce model. I'll go to PebbleStorm, I'll talk to Aaron, and I'll hire a bunch of SDRs and they'll call. But we forget that Salesforce, don't follow the Salesforce SDR model because you had 23-year-old salespeople using a sales product selling to salespeople. You can't do a 23-year-old salesperson who knows nothing about HR trying to tell an HR executive why you're going to change their life. So for me, it was very clear that I have a 4-year replacement market opportunity, and I need to get to them before Adam gets to them and sells them Talent Management Suite, or Workday, or SuccessFactors sells them their gobble of goods. And so that was my focus. The interesting thing, intellectually, it's the most simple go-to-market model. It's the most expensive go-to-market model, but it's the go-to-market model I did at Siebel. I know this model. It's see a bear, shoot a bear. It doesn't require a lot of IQ. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of funding. It requires a lot of money. Now, how I segment, which is different in a lot, I'm an investor in about 15 companies. We look at segmentation. I have this conversation with every day. So for me, my segmentation in my market is 2,500 employees and above, like Adam and I sell an FTE-based product, is enterprise. For me, that's the company that will spend $100,000. And then I have mid-market, which is sort of 500 to 2,500, and SMBs below that. Is how I look from a segmentation perspective.
Got it. So to wrap this point up, and then the answer was you went up market because it was a space that you knew, right?
We went up market because I was most differentiated of the product that I had built. So I went up market because based on the product that I had, my win rate and my sales cycle time and the ASP all basically said ding, 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 ding. And very little competition.
Less competition.
Less competition.
Usually when you go out market, there's less competition, right? Yep.
Could be.
Could be.
In my
yeah.
market, that's the case.
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
And last question on this, then we'll wrap it up because we could go forever.
Yeah.
When you go up market like that from the beginning, and then the small guys come in at a 10th your price or 50th your price, do you just have to let it go? Do you just let it roll over you, or how do you approach the ankle biters?
Well, I think one, up market, if you've done a very good job of explaining what are the up market requirements.
Yeah, they
There's
segment out before they
There's
get
a
to
whole
it.
list of can'ts, right? You go
Yep.
sell, you know, when you did your first enterprise deal, and you got to go talk to procurement. There's 6 can'ts that if you don't check the box require a bunch of infrastructure, there's no deal. And in my market, unlike sales and marketing, the buyer has no influence or ability to tell procurement or legal if they're being ridiculous. And then I think the other thing is there's your own internal can'ts. You know, do you have the ability to support this? Look, I think from a price perspective, I think of a story that I tell people on price. We were competing at Salesforce for a deal, and Microsoft was giving Microsoft On Demand away for free. There was a meeting with Mark, and we were proposing a $3 million price tag, and the customer said, Microsoft is free, why wouldn't I go with Microsoft? And Mark said, you should pay Microsoft $3 million for that piece of shit, is why. You pay for what you get. And so there's some HR appropriate version of that language that we use with that buyer, but I let it go. I don't compete on price.